I never imagined that the last month would make me see my family for what they truly are. I had worked for years, scrimping every paycheck, juggling part-time jobs at the library and the coffee shop, volunteering at the animal shelter, dreaming of UC Davis Veterinary School. Every test I took, every late night spent writing essays, every penny I saved, it all built toward that one moment: acceptance. When the letter finally came, I cried in the parking lot for 20 minutes, thinking my hard work had finally paid off. But then I learned the truth. My parents, the people who promised to support my education, had spent my entire college fund, my future, on my brother Andrew. Andrew, who at 28 had never kept a job longer than 4 months, who spent his days glued to video games, still living in our childhood home. A black BMW adorned with a giant red bow sat in the driveway as if it were a trophy. My life savings, the money my grandparents and great-grandmother had meticulously set aside for me, gone. I remember standing in the kitchen during his birthday party, my hands wet with dish soap, while my dad handed Andrew the keys. Everyone clapped. Andrew barely acknowledged anyone, slipping into the driver's seat like this was normal, like it was deserved. My stomach twisted in disbelief. My parents laughed nervously, brushing it off. "It's to motivate him," they said. "He needs stability." My stability, my dream. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the plates across the room, but all I could do was sit there, numb, feeling the floor beneath me give way. For years, I had been the responsible one, the one who saved, who worked, who sacrificed. I had kept my grades up, volunteered, and poured every ounce of energy into building a future I was told was secure. And in a single, thoughtless gesture, it had been stolen. I didn't know whether to feel rage or betrayal, heartbreak or disbelief. I didn't know if this was the moment my family broke, or if it had been breaking all along, quietly, in small, insidious ways that I'd ignored because I trusted them. One thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same. I drove to the coffee shop even though I wasn't scheduled, hiding in the back room, trying to steady my shaking hands. I called my grandfather, Bill, my mom's dad. He answered on the second ring. I told him what I found. Silence. Then, anger, determined action. Suddenly, my future was no longer in my parents' hands, but the battle had just begun, and I had no idea how it would end. My name is Emily Harper, and I'm 19. Growing up in our small Minnesota home, I was always aware that I wasn't the center of attention. That title belonged to my older brother, Andrew. From the moment he graduated high school, he never left. He lingered in his room, claiming he needed time to figure out his future, while I quietly took on responsibilities no teenager should bear. Babysitting at 13, shelving books at the local library by 14, adding a second job at 16, I did everything with one goal in mind: my education. Every paycheck went into my savings. Every ounce of effort went into my dream of veterinary school. I was the golden child in the making. Not the pampered kind, but the one who learned early that success required discipline, foresight, and sacrifice. I volunteered at the county animal shelter twice a week for 3 years, joined the science club, participated in debate tournaments, and maintained a 3.97 GPA. Every report card, every accolade, every exhausted weekend in a part-time job was a brick in the foundation of my future. Meanwhile, Andrew floated through life. A job here, a short stint there, grocery stores, delivery services, gyms. None of them lasted. He claimed he was building a career as a gaming streamer. His Twitch channel had 90 followers, most of them family, friends, or relatives checking in out of obligation. And yet my parents never pushed him. They paid his bills, co-signed loans for cars, brought him lunch in his bedroom, and excused his failures as temporary setbacks. I didn't resent him. Not fully. I loved my brother. But I learned early how dangerous favoritism could be. Small injustices piled up, invisible but heavy. The time my father replaced Andrew's crashed car without a second thought, while I counted every penny toward textbooks. The dinners where Andrew's needs were prioritized, while mine were quietly set aside. The whispered explanations: "He just needs more time. We're supporting him." Love and family loyalty kept me from complaining, kept me working harder, and, in many ways, kept me hopeful. I imagined a future where my own perseverance would be rewarded, where all the late nights and small sacrifices would culminate in something tangible, acceptance into UC Davis. And for a long time, that hope shielded me from the quiet resentment that simmered beneath. Our parents weren't wealthy. My father managed a department store. My mother taught seventh grade English. We lived comfortably, but there were limits. I understood that. I also understood fairness. And over the years, I began to notice the imbalance, the constant showering of Andrew with gifts, electronics, indulgences, while I learned to stretch every dollar and every opportunity. By the time I received my acceptance letter to UC Davis, I felt proud, exhausted, and ready. I pictured walking across the stage, tuition secured by the fund my grandparents had contributed to since my birth. The money my great-grandmother had left me for education, the savings I had painstakingly built myself, it was all part of a plan that promised a future worth striving for. I didn't yet know how fragile that plan was. I didn't yet know that years of hard work could be undone in a single, thoughtless act. But I had learned the patterns. I had seen the favoritism, the enabling, the quiet injustice. And deep down, I suspected that if I wasn't vigilant, the consequences could be devastating. Growing up in that house taught me one crucial lesson. Responsibility is earned. Fairness is not guaranteed, and sometimes the people you love most can become the ones who hurt you the most. I thought I understood those lessons fully. I was about to learn just how deep the betrayal could run. It started quietly, almost imperceptibly. At first, it was the little things. Andrew asking for money for gas or a new accessory for his gaming setup, and my parents immediately obliging. I would glance at the bank statements they left lying around, silently noting how much had gone toward him while I scraped by, saving every penny from my weekend jobs. I told myself it was just temporary. He was still finding his path. But the pattern persisted year after year. Electronics, gaming chairs, even a brand new car after he crashed the last one. Each gift a reminder of the disparity between his life and mine. Meanwhile, I had never asked for more than a modest allowance, never demanded gifts, never expected handouts. My achievements were quietly celebrated with a nod or a smile, while his every misstep was met with indulgence. By the time I turned 18 and graduated high school, the imbalance was glaring. I had earned honors, volunteered thousands of hours, and maintained a near-perfect GPA. Andrew had quit another job after 6 weeks, citing difficult customers and stressful management. And still, my parents justified everything. "He's just struggling right now," my mother would say, while my father shrugged as though her words were explanation enough. The tension escalated subtly but persistently. During family dinners, Andrew would sit on the couch, headphones on, scrolling through his phone. He barely acknowledged anyone, but my parents doted over him as though he were a prodigy enduring temporary hardship. Meanwhile, I found myself silently cataloging every slight, every moment of neglect, every gift lavished on him while I worked multiple jobs just to keep my college dreams alive. I started noticing the way friends and extended family tiptoed around him. They praised him for streaming efforts that yielded next to nothing, and they excused his laziness with bemused laughter. My parents defended his choices, framing them as visionary, while my accomplishments were quietly admired but never prioritized. Each instance planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Doubt not about myself, but about the fairness and integrity of the people I loved most. 3 weeks before my acceptance letter arrived, my mother asked me to help organize the filing cabinet in the den. I thought it was mundane work, sorting receipts, tax documents, insurance statements, but then I found it. A stack of bank statements for the college fund. My name was on the account. The balance was $127. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages, seeing the March withdrawal of $68,000 with the memo, down payment, and another showing the account closure fee. Every dollar that was meant to secure my future, gone. The realization hit me like a thunderclap. My parents hadn't just favored Andrew. They had stolen my future to fund his indulgences. A BMW, for a man who had never kept a steady job, for a childlike hobby, for a reward that was never earned. I couldn't comprehend it. I wanted to scream, to confront, to cry. But in that instant, I felt a strange mix of fury and disbelief, betrayal and heartbreak. When my mother returned to the room and saw me holding the statements, her face went pale. She stumbled through excuses, claiming it was to motivate him and that they would figure out loans for my school. Her words sounded hollow, desperate, and utterly inadequate. I left the house that day, driving to the coffee shop even though I wasn't scheduled, heart pounding, trying to process the enormity of what had just happened. That was the first seed of conflict planted deep within me. From that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same in our household. I understood, even then, that love without fairness is corrosive, and that my fight to reclaim what was rightfully mine was only beginning. The day I confronted the truth was unlike anything I had imagined. I sat in the coffee shop, staring blankly at my hands, the bank statement still clutched tightly, feeling the weight of betrayal pressing down like a physical force. Every calculation I had made, every plan for UC Davis, every dollar I had saved, it had all been undermined. My parents had spent my future on Andrew, a brother who had never earned it, a brother who barely acknowledged anyone outside his own little world of gaming and streaming. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I called my mother, voice shaking despite my best effort to remain composed. "Mom, why?" I asked. "Why would you do this? My college fund, it's gone, all of it." Her response was frantic, defensive, almost rehearsed. "Emily, it's not what it looks like. Andrew's been struggling. It's just to help him get back on his feet. We'll figure out your tuition. We'll get loans. Everything will work out." The words barely registered. The logic, or lack thereof, only deepened the sting. Loans. They had taken my future, and now they suggested I carry decades of debt for an education I had already earned through blood, sweat, and tears. I left the coffee shop and drove straight to my grandfather's house, desperate for clarity, for someone who would see the injustice. Bill, my mother's father, listened quietly as I recounted everything. Then, in a voice tight with barely controlled anger, he said, "This isn't just a mistake. This is theft, and it's deliberate. I will not let this stand." The next morning, Grandpa Bill and Grandma Jean arrived at my parents' house unannounced. My heart pounded as I followed them into the kitchen, where my parents were already tense and wary. The confrontation began immediately. Grandpa didn't mince words. "Did you take Emily's college fund to buy Andrew a car?" he demanded. My father stammered, offering the same excuses he had given me. He needed motivation, stability. We thought we were helping the family. My mother's eyes welled with tears, her voice quivering. "We didn't want to hurt Emily. It seemed like the right thing." Grandpa's face darkened. "The right thing? This money was given with a documented purpose, Emily's education. You spent it on a luxury car for someone who hasn't earned it. Do you understand what you've done?" Andrew, still groggy from sleep, emerged from his room. He yawned, leaning against the doorframe, barely paying attention. When he finally grasped what was being said, his voice rose in indignation. "Emily's being selfish. The car helps me get my life together. She can get loans. I need transportation now." Every word was a knife to my chest. I wanted to argue, to scream, to tell him he had no right, but the room was already a storm of voices. My grandfather demanded to see every financial document, and soon we were surrounded by a mountain of papers. Bank statements, loan agreements, receipts. The numbers painted a brutal truth. $68,000 from my college fund had gone directly into the BMW's down payment, with additional credit card charges to cover insurance, repairs, and party expenses. As I watched Andrew scroll through his phone, unconcerned, bragging about his new car to friends online, a sense of surreal disbelief overtook me. The brother I had admired, the one I had once trusted to celebrate life with me, had become a symbol of entitlement and manipulation. The parents who had raised me, who I had relied upon for guidance, had enabled him at the cost of my dreams. I felt a strange mix of grief and fury, a whirlwind of emotions I could barely contain. My hands trembled, my throat tightened, and tears pricked my eyes. I realized this moment was not just a financial crisis, it was a moral and emotional betrayal. Every lesson I had learned about fairness, responsibility, and trust had been upended in a single, cruel stroke. That was the inciting incident, the moment the invisible cracks in our family widened into a chasm. My future had been stolen. My brother, long indulged and coddled, had been given what I had earned. And in that kitchen, with my grandparents demanding accountability and my parents fumbling for explanations, I understood that nothing would ever be the same. The battle for what was rightfully mine had begun, and I was ready to fight. I drove back to my apartment in a daze, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My chest ached, a mixture of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. The city streets blurred past me. I barely registered the stoplights, the pedestrians, the honking cars. It was as if the world had tilted on its axis, leaving me floating in an unsteady void. For the first time, I allowed myself to think about the years of effort, the late nights volunteering at the shelter, the endless shifts at the coffee shop, the careful budgeting, all of it, undone by my own parents. My college fund, a concrete manifestation of every sacrifice, had been obliterated for Andrew's indulgence, and yet there was no remorse in his eyes, no recognition of what he had taken. I sat on the edge of my bed, the bank statements spread before me like evidence in a trial I hadn't asked to preside over. I traced the numbers with trembling fingers, feeling each dollar like a punch to my chest. How could the people who had promised to protect me, to nurture my ambitions, have done this? My mind raced, spiraling through scenarios and possibilities. Was there a way to fix this? Could I even trust them to make it right? Anger flared. I thought about confronting my parents again, screaming, demanding restitution. But a calmer, sharper part of me, honed by years of responsibility and patience, warned against reacting impulsively. This wasn't just a family argument. This was my future, and I needed strategy, not rage. I had to assess, plan, and protect what remained. Grandpa's voice echoed in my mind. This isn't just a mistake. This is theft, and it's deliberate. That clarity gave me a strange sense of strength. He would help me, guide me, and, if necessary, fight for me. But even with his support, I had to grapple with the crushing reality. My parents, the people I had loved and trusted most, had chosen Andrew over me. I replayed every interaction with them over the past weeks, the forced laughter at Andrew's birthday party, the dismissive excuses, the hollow promises of loans. I remembered my mother's face when she found me with the statements, pale and flustered, trying to explain it away. I remembered my father's avoidance, the way he averted his gaze, muttering reassurances that sounded like lies even as they left his lips. I asked myself over and over, did I miss something? Could I have done more? Did I fail to see the warning signs? But deep down, I knew the answer. I had done everything right. I had saved, planned, studied, and sacrificed. The failure was theirs, not mine. And yet the emotional sting remained, a deep, gnawing wound that no amount of logic could immediately heal. Finally, I made a decision. I would confront this situation with clarity and resolve. No screaming, no impulsive confrontation. I would gather evidence, enlist Grandpa's guidance, and demand what was rightfully mine. But before action came reflection. I allowed myself a quiet moment of grief, acknowledging the betrayal, mourning the years lost to favoritism and neglect, and admitting how deeply it hurt. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across my apartment, a sense of purpose began to settle over me. The initial shock and raw emotion had passed into something sharper, determination. My future had been stolen, yes, but I was not powerless. I would fight for my education, for my dreams, and for the respect that had been denied me. And for the first time since discovering the truth, I felt a flicker of hope. The path ahead would be difficult, but I would not allow their choices to define me. I would take control of my story, my education, and my future, no matter what it took. The days that followed were a blur of tension, confrontation, and quiet strategizing. My grandparents, Bill and Jean, had taken swift action after my call. They insisted on coming over to the house, documents in hand, ready to demand accountability. My parents were nervous, defensive, and fumbling, an uncharacteristic state that made the scene almost surreal. Andrew, meanwhile, seemed oblivious at first, lounging in his room, headphones on, absorbed in a digital world that had shielded him from consequence for so long. Grandpa began methodically, presenting bank statements, letters, and receipts. He had tracked every contribution to my college fund, every card, every deposit made by my grandparents and my great-grandmother, and every dollar misappropriated for Andrew's car. The sheer meticulousness of his documentation left my parents scrambling. They stuttered through excuses. He needed motivation. We thought it would inspire him. We'll figure out your tuition. None of it held water. The logic was twisted, self-serving, and infuriating. Andrew finally emerged, drawn by the raised voices. His reaction was immediate and predictable: indignation. Emily's being selfish. This car is helping me get my life together. She can get loans. I need transportation now. His nonchalance and audacity were staggering. I had spent years working, sacrificing, planning, and here he was, acting as though everything he had received was rightfully his. The confrontation escalated quickly. My mother began crying, stammering through explanations that sounded hollow even to her. My father became defensive, insisting that Andrew's happiness and stability were priorities. I could feel my own blood pressure rising, my chest tightening. I wanted to shout, to demand that he see the damage he had caused, but I kept my voice steady. Every word I spoke had to be precise, measured, and irrefutable. Grandpa took control, dictating a methodical review of all finances, loan agreements, credit card statements, receipts for the car, and even party costs were laid out on the dining table. The numbers told a damning story. $68,000 from my college fund had been applied to the BMW's down payment, with credit cards and other loans covering insurance, repairs, and party expenses. The BMW alone had cost more than any rational budget would allow for someone in Andrew's position. Each new piece of evidence made the atmosphere more suffocating. My parents' excuses grew more desperate, more incoherent. My grandparents' patience thinned, replaced by quiet fury. And through it all, Andrew argued, denied, and deflected. "Life isn't fair," he said repeatedly, each time with the casual smugness of someone who had learned early that charm and manipulation could bend everyone around him. Family, friends, and extended relatives began to weigh in, taking sides, offering advice, or simply expressing disbelief. Some whispered that I was overreacting, that Andrew deserved a break. Others, like my Aunt Diane and Uncle Greg, saw clearly that the wrong had been done and tried to mediate. Their involvement added both pressure and clarity. This wasn't just a private grievance anymore. The ethical breach was visible, undeniable, and escalating. Meanwhile, I was observing myself as much as them. I noticed the tremor in my hands, the tension in my shoulders, the racing of my heart. I felt anger, yes, but also an odd mixture of vindication and empowerment. For the first time, the fight for my future wasn't just about money. It was about asserting the principle that fairness matters, even within families, even when those families have failed you before. Weeks passed with repeated discussions, negotiations, and ultimatums. Andrew continued to resist, hiding the car, refusing to relinquish it, posting vague complaints online, trying to rally sympathy. My parents oscillated between panic and guilt, their faces etched with fatigue and confusion. Each interaction chipped away at their confidence, revealing the fragility that had long been masked by their enabling of Andrew. I, on the other hand, began to change from the inside out. The shock of betrayal had crystallized into focus. I started creating detailed spreadsheets, mapping out potential scholarship opportunities, calculating tuition, and projecting timelines for repayment if legal action became necessary. Every interaction, every document, every revelation strengthened my resolve. The family conflict, though emotionally draining, became a proving ground for my resilience, patience, and strategic thinking. By the end of the escalation phase, the household had been transformed. Tension hung like a thick fog over every room, silence punctuated by whispered negotiations, and every interaction carried the weight of accountability. Andrew's casual manipulation was being dismantled piece by piece, my parents' misguided favoritism laid bare, and my determination to reclaim my future sharpened to an unyielding edge. I realized something crucial. I could not rely on apologies or promises alone. I would need to act decisively, strategically, and with the backing of those who truly understood the injustice. The stakes had never been higher, and the cost of failure was nothing less than the future I had fought for all my life. By the time night fell, I felt utterly alone in a house full of people. My parents retreated to their rooms, consumed by guilt and shame, while Andrew sequestered himself in his new car, blissfully unaware of the chaos he had caused. The living room, once the center of family life, had become a battleground of silent resentment and unspoken accusations. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the floor, trying to process the avalanche of betrayal. My dreams, carefully constructed over years of sacrifice, had been stolen in a single, thoughtless act. My college fund, the money meant for my education, the investment in my future, now vanished into Andrew's indulgence. I had worked, planned, and saved, and yet my parents had decided his whims mattered more than my aspirations. A crushing sense of isolation gripped me. I had always believed in family as a source of safety, support, and love. Now it was clear that those foundations were hollow, trust shattered. The people who should have been my allies, the ones who promised to nurture and protect me, had chosen someone else's desires over my future. The betrayal cut deeper than any argument, any physical harm could. It was a violation of every expectation I had held about fairness, loyalty, and parental love. Tears came unbidden, hot and relentless. I pressed my face into my hands, feeling the sting of grief and disbelief. How could those I loved so deeply cause such profound harm? How could I have misjudged them for so long, believed in the fairness of their intentions, and counted on their promises? The house felt like a cage, each room a reminder of the injustice. I felt trapped, powerless, and completely undone. Even my grandparents, who had fought tirelessly on my behalf, couldn't erase the immediate sense of loss. They could demand accountability, they could negotiate repayment, but they could not restore the years of quiet sacrifice I had invested, nor could they shield me from the emotional devastation of knowing my parents had allowed such a betrayal to occur. In the darkest moments, I questioned everything about myself. Had I misread the signs? Was I too naive, too trusting, too patient? Should I have confronted them earlier? Should I have done more? The answers were elusive, tangled in a fog of guilt and sorrow that made my head spin. Every heartbeat echoed with the sense that my dreams, painstakingly nurtured, were slipping through my fingers. The night stretched endlessly. I wandered from room to room, searching for solace that did not exist. Every glance at the BMW in the driveway, every memory of Andrew's dismissive smirk, reminded me of the magnitude of what had been taken. My body ached with tension, my mind raced with scenarios of repayment, confrontation, and restitution, yet none of them offered immediate relief. I realized painfully that the betrayal wasn't just financial. It was emotional, ethical, and spiritual. It challenged every belief I had about fairness, loyalty, and family. The person I thought I could rely on, my parents, had failed me, and the sibling I had adored had exploited their weakness. For the first time, I felt the full weight of abandonment, the sense of being a lone warrior in a battle for my own life and future. But in that darkness, amidst the tears and despair, a flicker of resolve began to emerge. I recognized that while I could not undo the past, I could control my response. I could reclaim what was rightfully mine. I could fight, strategize, and endure. The depth of my despair was matched by the depth of my determination. This was my breaking point, and quietly, it became the moment I discovered the strength I had always carried within me. I took a deep breath, wiping my eyes, steadying my trembling hands. I would not allow this betrayal to define me. My dreams were too precious, my future too valuable. And even in the shadow of darkness, I felt the first spark of empowerment, a quiet promise to myself. I would rise, and I would reclaim everything I had been denied. The next morning, I woke with a mix of exhaustion and a strange, sharp clarity. The darkness of the previous night hadn't vanished, but it had been replaced by a sense of purpose. Grandpa Bill had already begun gathering additional documents, meticulously tracking every contribution made to my college fund over the years. He had receipts, letters, and bank statements. Everything was documented, irrefutable evidence that my parents' actions had violated the intent of every donation, every gift, every sacrifice made on my behalf. When I saw the full scope of the evidence, a wave of resolve washed over me. The betrayal that had seemed insurmountable the night before now became a battle plan. I realized that this wasn't just about money. It was about fairness, principle, and reclaiming my agency. I could no longer rely on vague promises or hope that my parents would make things right on their own. I had to act, and act decisively. Grandpa Bill and Grandma Jean sat with me at the dining table, spreading out the documentation like a roadmap for justice. Every deposit, every transaction, every memo line was highlighted and organized. The weight of preparation was immense, but the clarity it provided was empowering. I felt a sense of control that I hadn't experienced since the moment I discovered the theft. I called my parents into the living room, this time with Grandpa and Grandma present. The atmosphere was tense. My mother's hands trembled. My father's face was pale. I explained, calmly but firmly, that I now had concrete evidence of the misappropriation. I laid out the impact on my future, the lost opportunities, and the potential legal implications. I could see their panic growing as they realized the magnitude of what they had done. Andrew, still in the background, tried to interject, claiming the car was his and that the college fund didn't matter as much as his needs. But I stood firm, unwavering. I looked directly at him and said, "You do not get to define what's fair here. The money was never yours. It was for my education, for my future, and that is not negotiable." His smirk faltered as Grandpa added legal perspective, explaining the documented intent of the funds and the potential consequences if restitution was not made. It was the first moment I felt an undeniable shift in power. I had been a victim of manipulation and favoritism, yes, but I was no longer powerless. The careful documentation, the support of my grandparents, and the clarity of my resolve created a formidable force. I realized that fairness and justice were not abstract ideals. They could be enforced, demanded, and protected. I also felt a profound recognition of my own worth. For years, I had internalized the disparity, questioning whether I was too demanding, too ambitious, or too selfish for wanting what was rightfully mine. Now I understood that advocating for myself did not make me selfish. It made me strong, responsible, and deserving. My dreams, my hard work, my sacrifices, they mattered, and I had the right to reclaim them. That evening, I drafted a plan. The car would be sold, the proceeds returned to a newly established college fund under my and Grandpa's co-ownership. Any remaining balance would be repaid in installments if necessary. Legal counsel would be involved to ensure the process was transparent and binding. And I would continue to work, volunteer, and save, bolstering the fund with my own contributions to ensure my education was secure. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. The darkness was no longer suffocating. It had been pierced by a shaft of light. I realized that while I could not change the past, I could assert control over my present and future. I would not allow Andrew's entitlement, or my parents' enabling, to steal my dreams again. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a rare sense of peace. I knew the battle was far from over, that more confrontation, negotiation, and patience would be required. But for the first time, I also knew I had the strength, clarity, and support to see it through. I was no longer the powerless observer of my own life. I was the architect of its restoration. The fallout was immediate and profound. My parents, once confident in their misguided choices, now faced the consequences of years of enabling Andrew. The decision to reclaim my college fund and enforce accountability shattered the illusion of control they had maintained for so long. My father, who had always smiled through Andrew's mistakes, now sat silent, his pride wounded. My mother wept quietly, finally confronting the weight of their actions, the betrayal that had stolen from their own daughter. Andrew, predictably, reacted with outrage. He barricaded himself behind the steering wheel of the BMW, posting cryptic complaints online and refusing to hand over the keys. Social media became his stage for blame, a theater for deflection. Friends offered sympathy, but most of the extended family had grown tired of his manipulations and remained neutral or supportive of the restitution process. He had built his world on entitlement, and the collapse was swift and undeniable. Uncle Greg intervened, offering a pragmatic solution. He proposed buying the BMW from Andrew at fair market value, paying my parents directly, and ensuring the funds were placed in a college fund designated for me. It was the only way to prevent further escalation legal entanglements, and public spectacle. For Andrew, it was a bitter pill. He would walk away with nothing but the memory of the car he believed he had earned. The legal paperwork had already been filed, and resistance would only ensure he lost everything in court. The sale went through 3 days later. Andrew handed over the keys silently, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. The car, appraised at $64,000, was converted into a secure account, co-owned by my grandfather and me, ensuring that no future misappropriation could occur. He moved out shortly after, disappearing without a word, leaving behind a trail of frustration, anger, and unfulfilled entitlement. My parents were left to grapple with the aftermath. Their finances, long strained by years of enabling Andrew, were now laid bare. The mounting debts, maxed out credit cards, and hasty loans had left them shell-shocked. Grandpa Bill methodically walked them through the numbers, highlighting the decades of consequences their choices had created. No amount of regret could undo the stress, the financial strain, or the loss of trust. And me? I felt an unfamiliar sense of calm. The battle, though emotionally exhausting, had been fought and won. My college fund was restored, secured, and under my control. The years of sacrifice, planning, and hard work had been honored, and my future, though temporarily shaken, was intact. I no longer felt the need to demand apologies or explanations. The truth and the restitution spoke louder than words ever could. I returned to my apartment near campus, moving in with my roommate, and settling into a routine that reflected the autonomy I had fought to reclaim. Classes were challenging, shifts at the veterinary clinic and library kept me busy, and for the first time in months, I could breathe without the weight of betrayal pressing on me. Visits from my grandparents were a source of solace and practical support. They brought groceries, helped me organize my apartment, and offered quiet guidance on navigating my studies and finances. The restored college fund provided security, but more importantly, it represented a tangible affirmation of my worth, my effort, and my right to pursue my dreams. As for Andrew, the consequences of his actions were clear. He had lost the car, his status in the family, and any remaining credibility. My parents, while still loving him in their way, could no longer enable him. He was forced to confront the reality of independence, responsibility, and accountability. Lessons he had evaded for far too long. In the silence of my apartment that evening, I reflected on the tumultuous weeks behind me. I had witnessed the devastating effects of favoritism, manipulation, and betrayal within my own family. I had experienced grief, anger, and despair, and yet, through it all, I had emerged stronger, resolute, and empowered. I had reclaimed my future, my dreams, and, perhaps most importantly, my agency. The fallout had been painful for everyone involved, but it was necessary. The family, fractured though it remained, could now begin to rebuild on a foundation of honesty, accountability, and respect. I walked away from the conflict not with vengeance, but with quiet strength, knowing that truth and justice, once demanded and enforced, have a power far greater than resentment or fear. Months have passed since the storm settled, and life has begun to regain a sense of normalcy. I'm 6 weeks into my first semester at UC Davis, juggling classes, part-time work at the veterinary clinic, and shifts at the campus library. Every day is a step toward the future I fought so hard to protect. I have a secure college fund, a support system in my grandparents, and a renewed sense of purpose that no betrayal can take away. The experience taught me lessons I will carry forever. Family can fail you, even those you love most, but your worth is not defined by their choices. Hard work, persistence, and integrity are yours alone. No one can steal them if you hold firm. I've learned to recognize manipulation, to set boundaries, and to demand accountability, not with anger, but with clarity and resolve. I've also learned the value of patience and strategy. Acting impulsively might have brought temporary relief, but measured action, evidence, and support were what truly restored what was mine. In the chaos, I discovered the strength I hadn't fully realized I possessed. The ability to stand up for myself, protect my dreams, and navigate life's complexities with courage and intelligence. My relationship with my parents remains complicated. Trust, once broken, is not easily rebuilt. I don't know if it will ever be fully restored. But I have found peace in knowing that I no longer need their approval or support to pursue my goals. I am forging a life built on my efforts, my decisions, and my resilience. To anyone watching this story, here's the truth. Life will challenge you, sometimes in ways that seem unfair and unbearable. People may fail you, betray you, or take advantage of your trust. But your response, your determination to protect your future, your dreams, and your integrity, defines the trajectory of your life. Stand firm, seek guidance when needed, and never let anyone steal what you've worked for. In reclaiming my college fund, I didn't just restore a financial resource. I reclaimed my autonomy, my confidence, and my right to a future I could shape myself. That is the lesson I want others to carry with them. Even in the darkest moments, strength, clarity, and courage can light a path forward. And as I walk across campus, books in hand, heart steady, I know one thing for certain. My story isn't defined by the betrayals I endured. It's defined by the resilience I embraced.